Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Today, we're going to get into the world of ethics.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, specifically in the field of psychology.
Okay.
We'll be looking at the British Psychological Society's Code of Ethics and Conduct.
Right.
The December 2021 version.
Gotcha.
And, some people might be thinking, well, ethics? Like, I'm not a psychologist.
Right.
But these principles can impact everyone.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so understanding them can actually help you navigate
Yeah, definitely.
tricky situations that come up in your whole life.
For sure.
And plus, we're going to be exploring how things like the crazy new technology and climate change are bringing up new ethical dilemmas for psychologists today.
Oh, totally. It's fascinating how this code isn't just like a static set of rules. It's really more of a dynamic framework for making ethical decisions.
It's always evolving.
It is.
Yeah, and it's relevant to everyone.
Exactly.
So before we jump into all the details,
Yeah.
can you give us just a quick overview of what the British Psychological Society actually does?
Yeah, so think of the British Psychological Society, or BPS, as like the organization that sets the professional and ethical standards for all of its members.
Oh, okay.
So essentially, they're the gatekeepers of good practice within the psychology world.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So are there specific rules then that all psychologists have to follow?
You bet. They have these things called the member conduct rules, which basically lay out like the ground rules for all members, but the code of ethics and conduct that we're looking at today, it goes deeper.
Yeah.
It provides a much more detailed framework for navigating all those gray areas of ethical decision making.
Yeah, for sure.
And then if you're looking for even more specific guidance, they have the Code of Human Research Ethics and Practice Guidelines.
Wow. So they've really got all their bases covered.
They do.
But earlier you mentioned something about an evolving landscape.
Right.
When it comes to ethics.
Yeah.
So how does the BPS keep up with the times?
Well, they're actually pretty proactive about it.
Okay.
They update the code regularly.
Oh, wow.
To keep pace with changes in society and emerging challenges.
So they're not just dusting off some old rule book from the 50s.
No. For instance, the code that we're looking at today specifically addresses ethical issues surrounding the rapid evolution of technology.
Right.
And even the implications of climate change.
Wow.
So it acknowledges that, psychologists are facing a whole new set of dilemmas because of these issues.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
It sounds like being ethical then isn't just about blindly following the rules, but it's about adapting to new situations and thinking critically about what's right.
Precisely. They actually call it developing professional judgment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So less about memorizing do's and don'ts.
Yes.
More about cultivating a way of thinking about ethical issues.
Yeah, it's about understanding the nuances of different situations and being able to apply these core principles to make sound decisions.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So what are these core principles that the BPS code revolves around?
So it all boils down to 4 fundamental principles.
All right.
Respect, competence, responsibility, and integrity.
Okay.
And you can think of them as the pillars of ethical practice in psychology.
Gotcha. The 4 pillars of ethical psychology.
Yes, okay.
Okay, but what do those actually mean in practice?
So let's start with respect.
Go.
Respect in this context goes beyond simply being polite.
Right.
It's about acknowledging the inherent worth and dignity of every single person.
So treating everyone with respect regardless of their background.
Exactly.
Beliefs.
Yes.
Choices they make.
And it's also about recognizing the power dynamics that exist in any relationship, especially between a psychologist and a client.
Right, because power can definitely influence how people treat each other.
Absolutely.
So what about competence?
Yes. So competence really emphasizes the importance of psychologists staying within their areas of expertise.
Okay.
And not overstepping their bounds.
So knowing your limits and being honest about what you can and cannot do.
And it also means continually updating your knowledge and skills.
Okay.
And being willing to refer clients to other professionals when it's in their best interest.
So putting the client's needs first.
Yes.
Even if it means acknowledging your own limitations.
Absolutely. And that actually leads perfectly into the next principle, responsibility.
Okay, let's talk about responsibility.
Right.
What does that look like in the context of being a psychologist?
So responsibility emphasizes the accountability that comes with having professional autonomy.
Okay, so owning your choices and understanding that your actions as a psychologist can have a real impact on people's lives.
Precisely. And it also means navigating competing duties.
Okay.
For instance, balancing your responsibility to a client with your obligations to the wider community.
Oh, so it's like a complex balancing act.
It can be.
Okay, and finally, let's talk about integrity.
Yes.
What does that mean in the world of psychology?
So integrity is all about being honest, transparent, and fair in every aspect of your work.
So walking the talk, not just talking about ethics.
Exactly.
But actually living by those principles in your research, your interactions with clients, even your personal life.
Exactly. It's about ensuring that your actions are consistent with your words.
Right.
And upholding ethical standards across the board.
This is giving me a lot to think about.
Good.
But I'm curious, does the code actually provide any guidance on how to apply these principles?
It does.
In real world situations?
Yeah, absolutely. While it doesn't claim to have all the answers, for every conceivable dilemma, it does encourage psychologists to carefully consider their own strengths and weaknesses when faced with tough ethical decisions.
So not about having a perfect solution for every situation, but more about developing the self-awareness and the critical thinking skills.
Exactly.
To approach those challenges effectively.
That's a great way to put it. And it also emphasizes the importance of continuous learning and professional development.
Right. So it's about constantly evolving.
Yes.
And adapting your understanding of ethics as you gain more experience as the world around you changes.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The code explicitly acknowledges that it doesn't have all the answers because we live in a world that's constantly changing, presenting us with new ethical dilemmas all the time.
So how do we approach those dilemmas when the rule book doesn't offer a clear solution?
That's a question we'll dive into right after.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. I'm ready to keep exploring this.
Great. That's a question we'll dive into right now.
Okay. Perfect.
We were talking about how the BPS code of ethics doesn't claim to have all the answers. Right. When it comes to those really tricky ethical dilemmas.
Exactly. And the world is complex.
It is.
Always throwing us curveballs.
Throwing us curveballs for sure.
So what happens then when a psychologist encounters a situation that isn't directly addressed in the code? Like, where do they turn for guidance?
Yeah, that's where those 4 core principles we discussed earlier really come into play. Respect, competence, responsibility, and integrity.
Right.
When faced with a tricky situation, psychologists are encouraged to rely on those principles to guide their decision-making process.
So it's like having a moral compass to help navigate.
I like that analogy. The code provides the framework, but it's ultimately up to the individual to use those principles to make the best possible judgment call.
So it's about applying those principles thoughtfully.
Yes.
Rather than blindly following a rigid set of rules.
And here's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
The code encourages psychologists to really look inward.
Okay.
To examine their own values, potential biases, and any conflicts of interest that might be clouding their judgment.
It's like taking a step back and asking yourself, am I approaching this situation with a clear and ethical mindset?
Precisely. It's about cultivating self-awareness.
Okay.
And recognizing that our own personal experiences and beliefs can sometimes impact our decision-making.
Yeah.
Even when we don't realize it.
This is making me think about my own decision-making processes.
Right.
And how these principles could apply to anyone.
They do.
Not just psychologists.
That's a great observation. The principles outlined in the BPS Code of Ethics can actually offer valuable insights into how we interact with each other and navigate the complexities of any relationship.
Yeah, it's like a blueprint for ethical conduct.
It is.
That extends beyond just one specific profession.
You're absolutely right. The principles of respect, competence, responsibility, and integrity are universal and can guide ethical decision-making in any context, whether it's personal or professional.
That's empowering.
It is.
Even if I'm not a psychologist, I can still use these principles to make more thoughtful choices in my own life.
For instance, let's revisit the principle of respect.
Okay.
It encourages us to treat every single person with dignity, regardless of their background, beliefs, or circumstances.
Right.
That's relevant in every interaction we have, whether it's with family, friends, colleagues, or even strangers.
It's about recognizing the inherent worth of every individual, plain and simple.
Exactly. And the principle of competence.
Okay.
It reminds us to acknowledge our own limitations, to stay within our areas of expertise, and to seek out knowledge and guidance when we need it.
Yeah, it's about being humble, realizing we don't have all the answers, being lifelong learners.
Exactly. And let's not forget responsibility.
Right.
It reminds us that our actions have consequences and that we're accountable for the choices we make.
Recognizing that our choices can ripple outward and impact others.
Right. And finally, integrity calls on us to be honest and transparent in our interactions.
Okay.
To let our actions reflect our values and to do what we believe is right, even when it's tough.
These 4 principles really do provide a strong foundation.
They do.
For ethical behavior in all areas of life.
Couldn't agree more. They offer a framework for navigating human interactions and making choices that contribute to a more just and equitable society.
This has been incredibly eye-opening.
Good.
It's fascinating to see how ethics isn't just a static set of rules,
right,
but a dynamic process of self-reflection, self-awareness, and a genuine commitment to doing what's right.
You've captured it perfectly. But it's important to remember that ethical decision-making isn't always easy.
Right.
There will be times when we're faced with dilemmas that have no easy answers.
So what do we do in those situations, especially when the code doesn't give us a clear-cut answer?
That's when we lean on our judgment informed by those 4 core ethical principles.
Okay.
It's about weighing the potential consequences of our actions, considering the perspectives of everyone involved, and striving to make a choice that aligns with our values.
It sounds like ethical decision-making is an ongoing process of learning and growth.
Absolutely. It's about being receptive to different perspectives, questioning our own assumptions, and having the courage to course correct when necessary.
This deep dive has been so thought-provoking.
Good, I'm glad.
I feel inspired to be more mindful of the ethical dimensions, my choices in all aspects of life, not just in my work.
That's fantastic. Remember, ethical behavior is a journey, not a destination. We're all constantly learning and striving to make better choices.
Yeah, it's about being intentional.
Yes.
And striving to do what's right, even when it's challenging.
Sometimes the most ethical choices require us to step outside of our comfort zones and challenge the status quo.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
This conversation has really deepened my understanding of ethics and how relevant it is in every part of life.
I'm so glad to hear that. Before we move on, don't forget that the British Psychological Society has a wealth of resources on their website, including the full text of the Code of Ethics and Conduct. It's a valuable resource for anyone who wants to explore this topic further.
That's great to know. I'm definitely going to check that out.
Good.
This deep dive has sparked my curiosity.
Wonderful. As we wrap up this section, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Okay, I'm all ears.
We've talked about how the code acknowledges that it doesn't have all the answers.
Right.
So knowing that, how do you think we should approach ethical dilemmas in a world that's always changing and presenting us with new challenges?
Wow, that's a really great question.
It is, and it's something we can all ponder as we move forward.
I'm definitely going to be thinking about that. What are your thoughts? I'm definitely going to be thinking about that. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think approaching ethical dilemmas in a constantly changing world requires us to, stay engaged in open dialogue and reflection.
Right.
The BPS Code of Ethics is a great starting point.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's up to each of us to apply those principles to our own unique circumstances.
So it's not about finding a one-size-fits-all solution.
No, not at all. Ethical decision-making requires flexibility.
Okay.
The ability to consider multiple perspectives and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions.
Right.
Because what might be considered ethical in one situation could be completely inappropriate in another.
Right. It's about being sensitive to the nuances of each situation.
Yeah.
And recognizing that there isn't always a clear-cut answer.
And that's where our understanding of psychology can be so valuable.
Oh, okay.
We can use our knowledge of human behavior.
Okay.
Our understanding of group dynamics and, our awareness of how our own thinking can be influenced to help us make more informed and ethical choices.
So our training as psychologists can help us be more ethically aware.
Absolutely.
In all areas of life.
Yes, it gives us a unique perspective and a set of tools that we can use to navigate complex ethical challenges.
That's encouraging.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like I have the ability to make a positive difference.
Yes.
Even when faced with uncertainty.
That's the key. Ethical decision-making is about recognizing that there are gray areas.
Right.
Acknowledging complexity and striving to make choices that align with our values.
It's about being brave enough to ask those difficult questions.
Yes.
Challenge the status quo.
Exactly.
And up for what's right, even when it's hard.
You put it perfectly. Ethical behavior isn't about blindly adhering to rules. It's about engaging in a process of critical thinking.
Yeah.
Reflection and open discussion.
And it's a process that continues throughout our lives, right?
It is.
We're always learning and growing.
Precisely as the world changes and new challenges arise.
Right.
We need to be willing to adapt our understanding of ethics.
Yeah.
And refine our approach to ethical decision-making.
This deep dive has been incredible. I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for the importance of ethics.
Yeah.
Not just, in psychology, but in every aspect of life.
I'm so glad to hear that. I remember this is just the beginning of your exploration of ethical considerations. Keep reflecting on these principles. Discuss them with your colleagues, friends, and family.
Okay.
And strive to make choices that contribute to a more ethical and just world.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. It's been truly enlightening.
It's been my pleasure. And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the world of ethics. Keep asking those tough questions, keep challenging assumptions, and keep working to make a positive difference.